I was watching on the African Diaspora channel. They show this clip of a white guy eating in the snow talking about how white people have to start telling the truth about history, when I'm seeing right through this whole thing. See, they're not seeing through it, but I'm seeing right through it. They're praising him for what they're calling black-white history, because he wants to start teaching black-white history. This is how they start being slick. So he's on there talking about how white people need to start teaching the truth, but the way they tell it, for example, they want to keep inserting these small lies that keep them controlling the narrative. So that's where the problem comes in at. So, for example, with the Wilmington Massacre, a lot of people don't know what the Wilmington Massacre is, where there's a group of these white supremacists back in 1898, I believe is the year it happened. They came in and they took over the entire government. And the way they did it was they came in with their guns and they said, you know what? Nobody's allowed to vote except for white people. And if you do have the audacity to vote for anybody black, we're going to shoot you dead right on the spot. And if any white person has the nerve to vote for anybody, and this isn't a political discussion, we just talking truth right now. So I don't care about Democrat and Republican. That's a whole nother discussion and ain't got nothing to do with what I'm talking about. I'm just telling you the facts of what happened in Wilmington. They said the party of Andrew Jackson, which is the Democrat Party, and Andrew Jackson committed genocide on so-called black people. We're just going to hold off on that for right now. Okay. What the Ku Klux Klan and the White League did, they came in and they said, if anybody votes, they went to all the voting polls. They had hundreds of people at each voting poll with guns. And they said, if anybody votes, we're going to kill you if you don't vote Democrat, period. And they massacred people. That's why it's called the Wilmington Massacre. They went in there and they killed up a bunch of people. And then after they killed up a bunch of people, and this was all over raping somebody over a white woman, right? Same story. It's always over this. Something has to do with sex and a white woman. So they end up taking over the government. But see, when he tells the story, and this is the slick part, when he tells the story, he says that they had an integrated government with black and white people working together like kumbaya, and these white supremacists came in. No, see, that's where they want to take your power away from you, because it wasn't a white and integrated. It wasn't an integrated government. Wasn't nobody going for no integration at that time in the 1890s. Are you crazy? Wasn't no integrated government. This was one of the last places where black people controlled the entire government, was in South Carolina. This was the final straw, with the final destination, the last place we had left. Because see, what we don't know is we used to control all of America. America was ours forever. It was forever ours up until July 4th, 1830. And that's the first defeat we got handed on July 4th, 1830 with Andrew Jackson in the Trail of Tears. And we think that, oh, Andrew Jackson, he kicked out the Red Indians and moved them to Oklahoma. No, he kicked out the black people. The Battle of New Orleans, the battle in New Orleans, right? Because there was two of them. You got the War of 1812 battle that actually happened in 1815. That's a whole nother one, but that's the beginning of the end. Because in 1830, is when they finally took out so-called black people in New Orleans, in Galveston, and this is when they started the Trail of Tears. This is when they started the Trail of Tears, okay? So my point is that when talking about these things that it's supposedly because white people don't like the way black people look, right? So they go in and massacre people. No, they're not massacring people because they think they don't like your hairstyle. They're not massacring people because they don't like the color of your skin. This isn't, well, the white supremacists, that's what they do. No, that's not. There's a reason behind it. There's a good reason behind the white supremacists have a real good reason behind what they do. And it has nothing to do with what you look like. It just happens to be, that's the identifier mark to let them know who did it to them. But we're going to get into it. So this Wilmington Massacre, it wasn't like this guy tells it, because the way he tells it is we were all working together because, the white guy was sharing power with the black man, and he let you guys come on in and sit at the table with him, and then those evil white supremacists came in and took us both over. That's how he tells it. No, that's not how it happened. And when he tells the story like that and you believe it like that, it makes you feel like he's superior, because we all know we were just slaves from Africa, and the good guys from South Carolina brought us into power, and they were trying to change things. And then those evil white supremacists came in, and they came in and tried to see, this is what they doing. It's such a slick, it's such a slick way of doing it. But we about ain't nobody getting away with nothing slick today. Not today. What's another thing that he talked about? Black Wall Street. Okay. What we know of as Black Wall Street. See, because there was lots of Black Wall Streets. We just don't know that. They only tell you about one. In Tulsa, Oklahoma. Oklahoma was where, remember I told you about the Trail of Tears? Right. You had two choices if you was a black man in 1830, after Andrew Jackson and his allies defeated the so-called Black Americans army. See, we actually had an army, and we had guns. We weren't chucking spears. Okay. So we about to tell the truth about it. The Trail of Tears, which Andrew Jackson signed off on. He was the president and the general of the army who defeated, with the help, because he didn't do it by himself, with the help of the French and the Africans, they ended up defeating the Black Americans army. Now, what did we mean the Black Americans had an army? We were slaves from Africa, right? No, we weren't. See? And this is why they don't want us to know the truth. They don't want us to know who we are. But we about to find out who we are. Now, why did they bomb Black Wall Street? Well, Black Wall Street is Oklahoma. Where was the Trail of Tears? See, it wasn't red Indians getting kicked out of the forest and getting taken to Oklahoma. It was so-called Black Americans who were getting kicked out of New Orleans, Houston, Galveston, Tallahassee, Atlanta, Birmingham, Biloxi. All of these southern cities, Tampa, Virginia, all of these southern places, Memphis, Nashville, all of these big southern cities, the Trail of Tears, you had a choice. You could either say that you're African, and this is where the African slave comes from. This is where they got the idea for it. You could either say that you were African and you got to stay if you were a so-called Black Indian. And they'll be like, oh, well, you know, the Indians had a choice if they wanted to stay on their ceremonial land, because they want you to think that we were just, the so-called Indians are butt-naked spear chuckers too, who are savages and live out in the jungle. But what we don't know is that, no, they were talking about New Orleans. They were talking about Houston. They were talking about Dallas. They were talking about all of these big cities, Baton Rouge, okay? All of these big cities, they gave you a choice. The French army and Andrew Jackson's American army and the African army came in together and teamed up against so-called Black Americans' army. And they fought a war against our army. Our army lost the war. They gave us a choice. They said, are you African? They knocked on everybody's door. Are you African or are you American? Are you African? Okay, you can stay. You American? Hop on that Trail of Tears. This is our house now. All that money you have, we need that. Matter of fact, cut her head off. Cut their head off. Kill their babies. This is why they call it the Trail of Tears. They kicked everybody out. And they want to say that the Red Indian, this is what happened to him. No, that's not what happened to him. He was on the side of Andrew Jackson fighting against us. They ended up giving him reservations. They gave him more at first, but then they end up taking a lot of it back because they said, oh, we're stronger than you. So all that stuff you guys helped us take, we'll take half of that back. So he ended up getting some reservations out of it. And they start being like, we're going to tell y'all secret on you. And they said, okay, look, we're going to give you some casinos. So they paid them off. Every time one of the allied groups get mad and they like, oh, you just going to keep on doing us wrong? They say, oh, yeah. And then they say, okay, look, guys. We don't want these Black Americans coming. Remember how crazy they are. Okay, we'll pay you off. And that's what they do. That's why the Indians have these reservations in casinos now. Because I remember when they didn't have the casinos. And I remember when they was getting mad. And I remember when they was about to tell the secret. And they hurried up and paid them off. But anyway, back to Black Wall Street. If you didn't claim to be African for whatever reason, then you got put on that Trail of Tears. If they knew you weren't African, you got put on that Trail of Tears. And that Trail of Tears, where did it go? To Oklahoma. So Oklahoma was the new designated place for so-called Black Americans. Unless, because they didn't move all the black Americans out, unless you said, I'm a black African. And why did being a black African work? Because, see, we get told that white people came and got us, scooped us up from Africa by the millions. But that's not what happened. We used to own America. All of America was ours. We had an army to go along with it with guns. Okay? The so-called white people ganged up with the so-called Africans. Okay? They ganged up after the French Revolution. After the French Revolution, the so-called white people, the French army came with the French-speaking Africans. If you ever notice, all the Africans, most of the Africans, right? They speak French. They come over here and they start speaking the French. Yeah, this is why. That French influence, the Creole, the French, all that French influence in Louisiana. And when the Saints come marching in, we don't want to get into that right now. See, the same white guy who's talking about, well, they need to start teaching about Black Wall Street and what white people did to those lowly black people in Black Wall Street. They kept bombing them. We need to talk about how the white people came in and killed all the black people in the massacre of South Carolina and Wilmington. See, they keep on talking about it like we was just all so helpless always. We have no power. We're also helpless. And white people just come in and massacre us at will. This is the way he want to tell it. So, but this is their narrative. This is their game, trying to get ahead of it, to try to act like the powerful people are trying to help us now. Us weak, helpless little people. Okay? So they don't want to let go of this narrative that they have all the power, right? When they don't have all the power, and they never have had all the power. They ganged up with the French army and the African armies. They came in, they won the war. The French and the Africans went back home and left them with us. And then after our army was gone, they committed genocide on the civilians. And they went crazy on the civilians. This is what happened, right? They weren't fighting the army anymore. Now they're just fighting grandma and mom and dad and the little kids. See? So they don't want to let go of this narrative. Tulsa is one of the main cities in Oklahoma where the so-called Indians moved to. But we're not talking about red Indians. We're talking about the black so-called Indians, the Aboriginal people of America. Okay? That's who we're talking about. They weren't really Indians. This is just a fake name that they were given. But they keep on changing all our names. They change our names all the time. From Indians to Negroes to coloreds to black to African Americans. And now the new one is people of color. They circle them back. They couldn't think of a new one this time. So now we're people of color. Right? No, we're not. We actually have a real name. We have a real name.